I want to talk about G.K. Chesterton here while we still got a few minutes. He is one of my favorites in the book, and he is someone whose writing I've only really dove into in the last year and a half, 2 years. So I've read both of his big, well-known books, Orthodoxy and The Everlasting Man, and had guests talk about them on Upstream. But he was arrested by a very commonplace signal of transcendence. In fact, it was a dandelion. Could you tell us that story and then explain how it helped push Chesterton to become the writer we know?
Well, I love Chesterton too. On my other wall, I have the autograph of C.S. Lewis and G.K. Chesterton, and the flourish of his autograph is like the flourish of his writing.
Right.
But when he left school, he didn't go to Oxford and Cambridge like most of his peers. He was very artistic, and he went to the Slade School of Art in London. But it was very close to what you call postmodern today: cynical, debunking, nihilistic, and he even, as he said, flirted with the occult. So his worldview was incredibly dark. But as he was thinking of all this, he said, I was stopped in my tracks by a dandelion, not a rose or sunset on the beach with a margarita in your hand or the birth of a baby, a dandelion, a little weed.
Yeah.
And he is saying, no, the world is broken. You can see the ruin and brokenness of the world very easily. But even a simple thing like the dandelion reminds us it's still wonderful. There's beauty as well as brokenness. And then he says, how do you bring the two together? Which philosophy of life helps you to explain both the brokenness and the beauty? And of course, you read Orthodoxy, that incredible passage where it's almost like Archimedes shouting, Eureka!
Right.
He suddenly sees all the things fit together, bolt after bolt. They all fit together. And the prose is incredibly exciting because he sees that the Christian faith explains both the brokenness, because of sin, and the beauty, because of God's creation. But it's the little dandelion that sets him off.
This is the thing that signals us that Christianity is the answer to the transcendent longings we're looking for, is precisely its ability to explain both the brokenness and the beauty. So Chesterton talks about how this key moment he notices, and this is in Orthodoxy, if I remember correctly, this key moment where he notices that the critics of Christianity are always criticizing it for opposite complaints. So, Christianity is too airy-fairy, but it's also too dark and pessimistic. Christianity is too enchanted with the life of the ordinary people, but it's then too it's too dependent on the exalted and rich people and the bishops and all their finery and so forth. It's like it almost appears as if, number one, they're going to criticize Christianity no matter what because they're committed to doing so, and number two, that Christianity is seeing around all of these false dilemmas in a way that actually encompasses the whole picture, that embraces reality in a way that humans are very hesitant to do because we're small-minded and we like to set up oppositions where there don't need to be oppositions. But that in itself is a kind of signal that says something more is going on here, something bigger that bursts your categories apart.
No, I love that. My own word for it is the Christian faith is bifocal. It sees all the beauty because of this incredible world of wonder in diversity and beauty that the Lord has created. And yet you look at the ruin of sin, and you've got to be able to explain both, and the Bible does both. It's bifocal.
We've got a couple of lesser-known stories in here, and we have time for one more. I want to hear about Windsor Elliot and the little cheetah, because that one was interesting to me. She's not a very well-known character, and yet there's a signal of transcendence here and an illustration of how powerful something very simple, a simple realization can be in the life of someone who's just ignoring God.
Well, she's a Californian student who started to model on a whim and rocketed from San Francisco to Toronto to Paris to New York, and was a Ford model on the front cover of Vogue, and at the grand old age of 19-20 was engaged to a French baron who was the same age, wealthy, handsome, and they would have an incredible life, New York, Paris, every weekend. And he was a friend of people like the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, Pablo Picasso, Salvador Dali. And so the world was her oyster, put it mildly. But one weekend, they were at a party in the Hotel Maurice put on by Salvador Dali, the great surrealist painting. And it was really ground zero for surrealism. And in the middle of the party, chained to the table, was Dali's pet cheetah, a painted leopard, or a little ocelot, technically. And Windsor was looking at this incredible animal, lithe, beautiful, muscular, pacing in and out among the guests. It had been declawed, defanged, de-everythinged. And suddenly, she said, it was like it was a caricature of what it was supposed to be. And then she looked at the people. Men with their gold-encrusted Nero jackets, and the women with antlers in their hair, bejeweled, believe it. I mean, it was an incredible world. And suddenly it was like an abyss opening up. We, she thought, were a caricature of what we were supposed to be. She said, I've got to search for the meaning of life. This world of high fashion is so incredibly hollow. Something's deeply wrong. And she became a seeker. Now, in her case, 2 years on, people at Vogue directed her to mediums and all sorts of disastrous things. She wasn't a Christian. She'd been an atheist. She knew no better. And walking up Park Avenue one night, she prayed, having got nowhere, God, if you're there, I can't find you. You'll have to find me. And I don't actually tell the end of the story in the book because there's not time. But it was 6 months later that her mother, whom she didn't appreciate, was living with her, dying of cancer. And friends came in to visit her mother. And one day her mother was showing these friends her portfolio of all her modeling photographs. And the friends gasped. And Windsor said, why did you gasp? And they said, we're Christians. And 6 months ago, that was the very time she'd prayed that prayer, we were going to a prayer meeting in Seattle, and we were getting coffee for the group. And as we walked out of the checkout, the Holy Spirit said to us, pray for the girl in the front of that magazine. And they bought the magazine, put it down. Everyone had prayed for them. They'd prayed every single day. And that was Windsor. So her signal of transcendence was the little leopard. But she had then become a seeker and reached out to the Lord, and the Lord had found her.